Yeah, I don't know if you want to follow me anyway. Remember, I got Tyler and Taylor Swift muddled up last week. But thanks, Nate. It is very easy, isn't it, to get these different things confused. And it's often like this when we come to God's Word and we hear the words of Jesus. There's a whole lot of things we hear where we go, yeah, that sounds like Jesus. But there's other things where you go, I don't know, it just seems to rattle us, doesn't it? That there are these shocking, these unexpected, even unwelcome words that Jesus has to say. Like last week, we looked at this phrase. What sorrow awaits you who are rich, for you have your only happiness now. And I don't know about you, but when I read this, hear the words of Jesus, part of me is going, Jesus, could you just dial it down even just a little bit? Because when people talk about money, it's just an issue when it comes to Jesus and church and money. And maybe if we could just pull it back a bit, dial it down a bit, then people won't get their antenna up so much and get so worried about what you have to say. But Jesus continues to say these difficult things, doesn't he? And money being one example of that. And yet, Jesus told lots of parables. Lots of stories about the kingdom of God and around what that kind of looks like and the implications for us in the here and now. And out of the 30 or so stories Jesus told, 16 of those have actually to do with money and possessions. In other words, Jesus has no problem talking about this, even though he knows we're going to feel awkward. And I was kind of sitting with this and going, well, why does Jesus say these things? Why would he even be prepared for us to feel this way? And this is what I'm coming up with, that Jesus is the friend we all need, who's prepared to tell us what we need to hear, not just what we want to hear. Now, we do have people in life who would tell us what they think we need to hear when they don't love us. I think we all have those people around us too, right? But Jesus is one of those friends who's not just going to be wishy-washy and kind of just encouraging when we actually need somebody to put a mirror in front of us and say, hey, this is where reality is. But let me show you where you can get to actually experience genuine freedom and life. So imagine going to a financial advisor because you've got escalating credit card debt and you want to think about retirement and you know your financial situation is not very good. So you go to a financial advisor and she says to you, no, you're doing a great job. You don't need to feel bad about your situation. Just continue to do what you're doing. And so you leave thinking, well, that's the professional. They meant to know what's going on. But then, years later, or perhaps decades even later, when things come crashing down in your life, as they will in that situation, you go back to her and say, well, you're my financial advisor. And when I met with you, you said everything would be okay. I didn't need to change anything. And she would say to you, well, I just didn't want to have that awkward conversation. You look so happy. You're enjoying everything around you. I didn't want to upset you. Why would I disrupt that? We would never endorse a financial advisor like that. The very reason we go to somebody like that is to give us the truth of our situation and for that person to help us become the person we want to be. And here is Jesus in his word, acting as both friend and financial advisor to help us see where reality is and to help coach us to the life that he calls us to live. And so I want to kind of stay with this topic again for this week because Jesus spoke so much about it and hone in today on Luke chapter 16 and what I think is the most surprising parable, the most surprising story Jesus ever told, seeking to change our perspective about money. So this is his story. Jesus told this story to his disciples. There was a certain rich man who had a manager handling his affairs. And so there's going to be these two characters in the story. There's an employer who owns this business right here. He's called the rich man. And then there's this manager who's managing the business that this rich man owns. So let's hear the story. One day, a report came that the manager was wasting his employer's money. So the employer called him in and said, what's this I hear about you? Get your report in order because you're going to be fired. Right now I've got the auditors coming in, and by the end of the day, I'm gonna know whether these stories I'm hearing about you are true and accurate. And if you've been mismanaging my affairs, you're out of here. You're going to be fired by the end of the day. Now, this manager realizes that actually he knows two things about himself. He knows, first of all, yeah, this is true. This is me. My job is about to be over. And secondly, he knows this has been a pretty good gig. He doesn't want to be doing anything physical. He kind of likes this job, so he says. Manager thought to himself, now what? My boss has fired me. I don't have the strength to dig ditches. I'm too proud to beg. And then there's a light bulb moment. I know how to ensure that I'll have plenty of friends who will give me a home when I'm fired. He suddenly realizes that he has a little bit of time, he has kind of the rest of this day left before he's officially fired. A little bit of time, a little bit of opportunity. And so he steps in. He invited each person who owned money to his employer to come and discuss the situation. He asked the first one, how much do you owe my boss? The man replied, I owe him 800 gallons of olive oil. So 800 gallons of olive oil at that point is about 3 years' wages. So if you think, at the moment in Auckland, the average salary would be something like $67,000. Multiply that by, 3 years. It's about, $200,000 we're talking about here. So this guy owes the equivalent of $200,000. The manager told him, take the bill and quickly change it to $100,000. Half of what you owe my boss. But here's the thing. You have to do this in the next 4 hours. I'll cut the bill in half if you just pay up in the next 4 hours. Now, this guy's thinking, wow, awesome. I mean, of course I'm going to do that. He gets on the phone, makes a few deals with other people, and actually within the hour, he's paid half the bill, seizes that opportunity. And as a dishonest money manager starts to leave the office, this guy that owed the money yells out to him and says, hey, I just want to thank you for stepping in and giving me such a deal. Oh, and by the way, if I can ever return the favor to you, you be sure to let me know. To which the dishonest money manager mumbles to himself, oh, I certainly will. Sooner than you might think. And then he goes on. Next person, how much do you owe my employer? He asks another. Well, I owe him 1,000 bushels of wheat, which would be like 10 years' wages, equivalent of debt. Here the manager said, take the bill and change it to 800 bushels. I'm going to give you a 20% discount. As long as you pay that bill right now in the next, 4 hours. 20% off, 2 years of what you owe my boss is about to go. Again, this guy can't believe his luck. I mean, taking 2 years of what I owe straight off my debt. He's on the phone, does a few deals, and within the hour, he has what the guy needs. And again, as the dishonest money manager starts to leave, this guy yells out to him, hey, if I can ever return the favor, be sure to let me know. And are you free on such and such night to come over for dinner? And the guy said, yeah, I love to come. We have a lot to talk about. And so this is what happens to everybody that owes money. And so you get to the end of the story, and you get to the end of that day, and I guess the auditors have come in, they've checked the books, and sure enough, the guy has been mismanaging the business. Business owner would be upset about that. On top of that, the business owner has heard that this guy has been mismanaging his affairs. He's cut the debts, and you can't go back on these deals that have been made. And then there's like this surprising end to the story. And Jesus says, the rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal. I love this word. The dishonest rascal for being so shrewd. So what do we do with a story like that? I mean, does that surprise you, the type of story that Jesus told? You see, what I expect at this point now in this story is that Jesus is going to talk about business ethics, going to talk about maybe dishonesty. But then Jesus goes in a very different direction. And he identifies, I want you to notice, this man had a little bit of time, and he had a little bit of opportunity, and he grabbed that and made something for himself. And I want you to learn from this, is what Jesus says. This is how Jesus put it. It's true that the children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than are the children of the light. Now, there's kind of a few code words here. So children of this world are the people who live for the here and now as if there is nothing about eternity. You know, what we see, what we sense with our five senses is all there is in this world. Jesus says it's like those people who often don't even believe that there's a God, are more shrewd in dealing in this world than the children of the light, the people that actually believe in Jesus and believe in an eternity after this world and believe that there is more than what we see and sense around us. And we need to learn from the dishonest money manager, to which if you're like me, you're going, really? I mean, does this surprise you that Jesus wants us to learn something from him? Jesus goes on. And this is his first lesson he gives to us. It's like he's taking the role of a financial advisor, and the first thing he wants to say to us is your money is a tool to make forever friends. And so Jesus says, he kind of lays out the lesson. Here's the lesson, Jesus says, from this story. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends, just like this guy did. Then when your earthly possessions are gone, they will welcome you into an eternal home. Your money is a tool to make forever friends. The shrewd money manager understood that, so he made deals with people so that they would pay back that generosity in a day to come. He was doing it purely for his selfish interest, and Jesus says, I want you to learn something from this. Money can be this tool. All of our stuff belongs to God anyway. We have it kind of on loan for a little bit of time, a little bit of opportunity. And Jesus says, why don't you use that time and that opportunity you have right now to actually make friends for eternity? And this is for your interests as well, for eternity. You know, I remember the first time I came face to face with the story that Jesus told. At the time, the church I was pastoring began this school in the rural area of northwest Thailand. And it was a really impoverished area. There was no running water, there was no sanitation, there were no schools anywhere. And this rural church was wanting to go in and work with the local villagers to begin a church and to place in water and sanitation and a school. And so I wanted in on this. But at the time, Robin and I were giving like 15% of our salary away to church and missions already. But we wanted like a future share in this project, to be part of what was happening to build a school in this area. And just a year earlier, Robin had bought me this really cool fish tank. It was a special birthday present she gave me, this big tank, really big tank, and had like 50 fish in it, had little caves where the fish could go in and hide, and cool lights and everything else. And at night, everybody had gone to bed, and I would just like sit there watching the fish do what fish do, and trying to hide, and it's just mesmerizing, right? And if you love fish and fish tanks, you would kind of share in my joy and what I had. But then this passage kind of got under my skin, and I began to look at that tank differently. Now, I still love the tank, still love large fish tanks, love watching fishes, and there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, I realized I could actually sell this tank and use that money to invest in making friends for eternity. And so that's what I did. I sold the tank. I gave money to the school that was being built overseas, and I've never regretted that decision. And years later, it still sparks discussions in my family. That came up just 3 weeks ago. We were walking past a fish shop, and there was fish tanks there. And again, I love kind of stopping and looking at what's happening there. And one of my older kids who remembers that we had that large fish tank many years ago, we were talking about this. And I was able to say again, imagine one day meeting some of these children and spending eternity with them. That they've come to, presumably come to know Jesus and love Jesus now, all because we played a really small part in providing for that school. And this is what Jesus is saying here in this story. And let's be honest, all of us here in this room, all of us listening online, if we know Jesus, we're actually recipients, we're beneficiaries of someone else's sacrifice. As Christians here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we can trace our Christian history back to a group of very ordinary women and men who were meeting in South London. We call them the Clapham Sect today. I've mentioned this before. This Connect group was made up of ordinary politicians and lawyers and poets and reformers, and they came together, and over 70 years they began organizations like SPCA and Bible Society, and they began also this missionary network organization called CMS, the Church Missionary Society. And one of the first mission bases was in Paihia, New Zealand. These were the early missionaries that came out. And when these early missionaries came, history tells us, and many of them sold everything they had. They bought a coffin. They bought pretty much everything they owned in that coffin, and then they sailed to New Zealand. And the reason they had that coffin was not just to store things in, but just in case something actually happened to them over the months or years ahead. Do you understand what they're doing? They were risking everything for the sake of Jesus, so that you and I, even, generations later, could actually come to know Jesus. And the reason they did that is words like this. Remembering the words the Lord Jesus himself said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. That they thought it was better for them to actually sell up shop and actually invest and to give their life, to give their time to something beyond themselves, which is why we're here today. Loving Jesus, worshiping Jesus, praying to him because we've heard about Jesus through the sacrifices of others. And again, the reason they did that is because, well, this is what Jesus did. The one we follow, the one we pray to, the one we worship, he wasn't just prepared to give his life, he did give his life. And out of his sacrifice, we're able to be here today. And so Jesus says, I want you to use your stuff. I want you to use your money to make friends. And sometime in the future, when you do that, you'll hear words like, somebody will come up to you and the future new heavens and earth, and they'll say to you, hey, do you remember me? I was 6 years old when I came to your church there at Grace City, and my family and I came along, and I went up to Kids Space, and it was through that time there that my parents led me to faith. And you were the one who would give regularly to the work of God there in that church, and I came to know Jesus through that ministry. Thank you. I'm indebted to you for eternity. Or somebody else might come up and say, hey, do you remember me? I was part of the youth group, and for some reason you allowed the youth group to come by and use that flash sparkle that you have. And I was the one that broke the control panel that night because we were having too much fun. Sorry about the control panel, but I guess it doesn't really matter now, does it? But I came to know Jesus through that time and just connect as part of the youth group. Thank you for the way you used what you had for me to come to know Jesus. Or you might hear somebody come up and say, hey, I was part of a Connect group, and we used to meet in your living room, and there was a whole lot of times that I was going through tough moments, but you were there using your living room, and we would connect and we would pray together. Thank you for getting me through those tough times. Or you might meet somebody else and they might say to you, hey, we actually never met, but you used to support that CAP ministry in your church as part of the overall ministries of your church. And I was in debt, and I came to see a debt coach. And then through that, not only did I get financial freedom, but I actually came to know Jesus and to love Jesus. I'm indebted to you for life. You see, every time you give, and every time then you see somebody baptized or see somebody come to know Jesus through Alpha, or experience financial freedom, or hear stories from Tanzania or China or whatever it is we're doing as a church, you're involved in that. And these are your friends, Jesus says, because you're using your money as a tool to make forever friends. That's the first bit of financial advice Jesus gives. And then he steps in and gives us another bit of financial advice. Your money is not just a tool, but is a test of your faithfulness. You see, often I hear people say something like, I plan to be more generous one day. If I have $1 million, or if I win lotto or something, well, then I'll be generous. Or if I have like $150,000 salary a year, well, then I'll start to be generous. And if I was just like given a dollar for every time I heard that, today I would be a really rich pastor, because it's something that I hear all the time. And Jesus says, actually, there's a test to know whether this is actually true for you or not. And it's based on what happens now. Jesus puts it this way. If you are faithful in little things, you will be faithful in large ones. If you're dishonest or unfaithful in little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. And if you are untrustworthy about worldly wealth, He will trust you with the true riches of heaven. If you're not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with things of your own? Hear what He's saying? It's not about, one day when you might have that high salary or that great kind of gift that's given to you and then you become generous. It's all based on what you have now, whether that be a lot or a little. How many of you have ever shopped at the retail chain Farmers? I'm guessing a whole bunch of us here, right? So over 100 years ago, this man here founded Farmers. His name is Robert Laidlaw. Over 100 years ago. And Robert Laidlaw was an Auckland businessman, but in addition to that, he was also a follower of Jesus. And so very early on, as he began the business, he made this commitment to tithe his income, which is like giving 10% of what you earn away to church and kingdom causes. And so that's what he did. And Farmers continued to thrive. And so he continued to give 10% of everything that he had. And then Farmers continued to thrive. And then Robert Laidlaw was reflecting on stories like the one we're looking at today. And he made quite a unique decision. And instead of just, that 10% as he earned more, obviously he would give more, but he decided, actually, I'm going to increase the percentage of what I give as well, which is kind of an unusual thing for people to do. And by the end of his life, get this, he was actually living on a reverse tithe. In other words, he was living on 10% and giving away 90% for kingdom purposes. And 100 years later, there are still churches around Auckland who he helped begin. The seats of those churches are still there that he paid for from what he would give. There's theological libraries around our country that he helped begin. In fact, one of those theological colleges now named after him, Laidlaw College. You see, when people hear stories like this, I think most of us tend to go, well, I would do the same thing. If I had like truckloads of money, well, then I would be generous. But again, Jesus says the way to test that is what you're doing right now with whatever you have. You see, what I've found to be true is when the Spirit starts to ignite and stir something within us for generosity, a good-hearted Christian will really say no to generosity. Instead, they use another word. You know what that word is? Say it with me. Later. Have you ever heard anybody do this? Perhaps you might have heard yourself do this. A couple graduating from university and about to marry, they're in their mid-20s, they want to be generous someday. But, now it's just not the right time. There's student loans, there's a wedding to save for, there's work wardrobes, there's tools. We need to get a deposit together for a house, and that's really hard. So they don't say no, they say later. And then kids arrive, and kids are expensive. Believe me, I have 4 of them, I understand. And so the couple goes, well, we're down to one income for a particular season. Now's not the right time, they say. Later. And then the kids start to get older, they need a bit more room, and so they upscale their house, now in a bigger house, bigger mortgage, and then they hear, well, mortgage rates might be about to climb, and so let's get our debt down. Now's not the right time, so let's do it later. They intend to give, it's just now's not the right time. And then all of a sudden, they are 60 years old, they say, we'd love to be generous, but we have retirement about to happen, and we haven't really saved a whole lot. Now is not the right time. We will do it. But, 40 years is pretty hard to turn the clock back on. There's a lot of ruts that start to happen at that point in our life. And they honestly believe that one day when they would have extra, well, then they would give extra. But do you really think that rut can be reversed when this is what you've been doing throughout your life. You see, that word later is lethal. And what I've come to understand is that word later really means another word, even though we never say this out loud. But that word later really equates to no. I like to give, but when I see what that might mean to my current situation, no. And what Jesus says right here is that our money is a test of our faithfulness. And it's not actually about the amount, it's about the posture of our heart. And Jesus wants us to look at it now. Whether you're a teenager, whether you're graduating from uni, about to have a child, saving for a house, paying off a mortgage, saving for retirement, it's about now. And so what's your plan? You see, most of us here know how to plan when it comes to something that we want. It might be a house, it might be savings, it might be a car. And the more determined we are to have that item, the more aggressive we tend to be in our savings. We come up with a plan for these things. The problem is most of us don't have a plan when it comes to giving. Now, I'm told that 40% of Grace City attenders, 40% of people who make up who we are as a church community, 40% of us give on a regular, intentional basis. There's a plan in place, and that's incredible. And if you're in that kind of 40%, it's absolutely wonderful that you have that plan and that you're already contributing to the work of God in this place. But of course, you also know what that means, right? It means that 60% of us don't have a plan. Now, if you're in that other 60%, it doesn't mean that you don't give anything. You might still give, $10 in the giving box on your way out, or there might be an appeal from time to time for something, and you give to that, or there's some global cause, and you're all in on that. But really, there's no plan for intentional generosity to others. Now, if you know me, if you've been coming to Grace City for a while, you'll know that this is a very awkward talk for me to do. I hate talking about this topic. And yet what I have found is that I have to take courage that these are the words of Jesus, and I'm just trying to allude us to them, point us to them, and help us feel the discomfort that I feel and that all of us probably need to feel around this topic. But again, it's not about the amount. It's about the posture of our heart. It's about what we have now. So as our friend and as our financial advisor, Jesus gives us already 2 tips. 1, money is a tool to make forever friends. And money is a test of our faithfulness. One other one he gives in our passage here. Your money is a trademark of your allegiance. In other words, what you do with your money will show whether you are following after Jesus or following after something else. And what you do with money will effectively brand you and show who your allegiance ultimately is towards. So Jesus says right here, no one can serve 2 masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And yet, isn't this something we think we can do? Jesus says money can master us. Our possessions can possess us. We can think that we are following God, and yet we can see whether we are or not basically from our bank account and what we're doing with money as to who has our ultimate allegiance. Now, I have never met anybody in my life that would say money is my master. And yet it happens, doesn't it? It's often one of those things, we can see it in other people, but it's often hard to see in ourselves. But it happens. And it tends to happen slowly, almost in these little increments, little by little, as money starts to take hold of our lives. And it can happen to people that we would never expect it to happen to. Here in our story, here in Luke 16, Jesus goes on to say, this happened to unexpected people back then. It happened to the religious leaders. Now, when I mention religious leaders to you today, most of you don't even blink an eyelid about, being surprised by that because we hear so many stories, sadly. But back then, this was radical. And so Jesus says, the Pharisees who dearly loved their money. Now this would be radical. The Pharisees, these were the people esteemed in society. It's like a mum with her little boy Johnny, would stop in the village, and when a Pharisee walked by, she would say to Johnny, I want you to grow up and be just like that Pharisee one day. They were highly respected. And yet Jesus says they dearly loved their money. And one of the reasons they had issues with Jesus is because they had a love of money. And Jesus said to them, you like to appear righteous in public, but God knows your hearts. What this world honors is detestable in the sight of God. He doesn't hold back, does he? It's like he just brings the punches in, because this is what often has a hold in our lives. As I reflected on this financial advice of Jesus, I wrote down a question this week that I've had to sit back and reflect on. How would I know if money is my master? And how would I know if money has my allegiance more than Jesus? Is my allegiance more to money, or is my allegiance more to Jesus? And then after that, I jotted down 4 or 5 statements that I've tried to unpack this to reflect on for myself, like a diagnostic tool almost for myself. And maybe this is helpful for you today too. Here's the first one. When I am anxious about my finances, I'm not trusting God to provide for my needs today and tomorrow. Rather, I believe in the power of money to make me feel more secure. Just sitting with that for a bit to go, actually, do I feel the anxiety about my finances? If I do, really, I am trusting in money to save me and provide for my security, rather than actually looking to God. This is a faith issue. Here's the second one. When I find my thoughts returning again and again to something I'm hoping to buy, I'm actually in love with money and its insidious promise to make me happy. Now, it's not that we can't look forward to something in our lives, but when that kind of captures our imaginations, it's like, well, perhaps we're more in love with that item, more in love with what's happening there than we are in Jesus and the gospel, that we receive such a wonderful gift from Jesus. Third one. When I find myself wishing I had some item that someone else has, I am seduced by money's promise to give me status or pleasure. Again, I can be looking to something else or someone else for my pleasure or my status or a reputation, and not really being content with what I have in the here and now, which is about this one too. When I spend more time complaining about what I do not have than rejoicing in what I do have, I'm foolishly depending on my possessions to give me contentment and joy, rather than realizing what we already have. That we are, we have all these things given to us from Jesus to enjoy. But so often we're thinking about what we don't have as we get grumpy and dissatisfied. And then finally, when it seems too difficult to give up something I want in order to give a regular gift to my church, I am more in love with money than I am with Jesus. Kind of one of those moments you start to feel uncomfortable, right? And at this point, when we kind of come to this moment when many of us start to think about what does that look like to begin like a regular plan, what I've found when I'm in those moments is all these like what ifs start to come to my mind. It's like these fear-induced what ifs. What if X happens to me? What if my financial situation changes? What if, and we can kind of come down with a huge list, right? And so we kind of get paralyzed and we don't kind of step into that moment and set up a plan. What I think Jesus is saying is, why not park that fear-induced what-if list and instead put a gospel-inspired what-if list in its place? And start asking some other questions. What if I actually do follow the advice of Jesus here for my life? What if I actually believe that what Jesus has to say about my money and my life will actually bring me more joy and freedom than what this world says about money and life? What if my money can actually lead to people coming to know Jesus, and so these people will be my forever friends in a day to come? What if I stepped in and actually did that? What if the next generation and the next and the next and the next are so impacted by my example of generosity that they step in and they start giving as well? All these gospel-inspired what-ifs replacing the fear-induced what-ifs. See, friends, Jesus would never have taught this if it wasn't important to him and if it wasn't the very best thing for us to hear and to live into. But that doesn't mean it's easy, is it? And the look on your faces, I realize this isn't easy for us too. And it's not meant to be. But that's why we need the Spirit of God to fill us and to help us take the next steps we need to pursue this life of freedom and joy. It's why we need to be a community of prayer and worship, because our giving is a demonstration of our faith, just as worship and prayer is. It's a step we take actually believing that the words of Jesus are better than the words of culture and will be better for my life, my family, and my friends. See, it's easy for us to be consumed in a world of stuff. But why don't we tip that the other way around and be consumed with a love for Jesus? He invites us to join with him in seeing our city transformed. He is the friend we all need, who is prepared to tell us where we're at right now and also what it looks like to pursue life and freedom. But if we can stand together right where we are, ready to pray. I often find in these moments just placing my hands in front of me with this open posture, because this is what the gospel is. This good news, Christianity believes we are all recipients of something that has been given to us. We didn't do anything to earn it. It's been given to us. So our hands are full of the grace of God. Everything good that we have comes from God. But let's pray and reflect on what that might mean for us in this moment. Jesus, thank you that when we talk to you, we're talking to someone who doesn't just ask us to do something that you haven't already done. You left the glories of heaven, the riches of glory, and you left it behind in order to come and save us. And you used it as a tool to make us your forever friends. You were faithful in what you had. You were faithful to do what you were asked to do. And when you were tempted by money and power, you didn't allow it to control you or define you. And so with our hands wide open to you, we're asking that the Spirit of God, you would come and you would fill us. Many of us have this battle going on in our minds and our hearts over the words of culture and the promises of culture and the words of Jesus. It's the Spirit of God, would you come and fill us and help us to find our identity again in you. Help us to see that we have received so much from you. And help us to believe these words from Jesus. Help us to have the courage to do what you call us to do. In Jesus' name. And they all said, amen. Now we're going to continue to worship in this final song this morning. And we have communion up here at the front and at the back. If you're online, find some bread and juice in your fridge and kind of join us for this moment too. And as we take bread and as we take the cup, we're saying this is what sustains us. Again, it's freely given because this is the picture of the gospel. It's all been given to us. And yet just as we have received, as we take the bread and cup, we're part of a community, we're saying, who wants to step out and to give our life and everything we have for the sake of Jesus and his call upon us. Let's continue to worship.